Each decade has seen a drop in the number of drivers killed driving in Formula 1. Thankfully today, driver fatalities aren't as common, but back in the 1970s, it seemed like a bloodbath. Death was just accepted in those days. These drivers put their lives on the line, and they still do today, but obviously safety has come a very long way. With all the fatalities that took place during the 1970s, one incident in particular stands out among the rest. This horrifying incident occurred at the 1973 Dutch Grand Prix. In the event, Roger Williamson, a young British driver for the March team, was competing in only his second Grand Prix. Many regarded him as a terrific prospect with a ton of talent who had achieved special success in the British club racing scene. He won the 1971 and 72 British Formula 3 championships. In his Formula 1 debut, he was involved in a wreck that took out several drivers, so he was very keen to race at Zandvoort, and his vehicle was repaired in time for him to compete. It all seemed very promising for the 25-year-old after qualifying in 18th place. Williamson was looking forward to his second Formula 1 race. Early on, he settled into the race with fellow British driver David Purley after the first few circuits. By all accounts, the two were fighting for position, with Williamson coming out on top. He began to distance himself, and it was looking like he was about to go on to have a solid finish in his second race. Unfortunately, not long after, this is where all hell would break loose. The incident occurred on lap 8 of the race. Williamson blew a tire at one of the quickest areas of the track, reaching roughly 140 to 150 miles per hour, and slid right into the Armco barrier. The Armco barrier wasn't correctly attached and worked like a springboard, propelling his car across the track and upside down. Williamson's car caught on fire while rolling over the track, and the smoldering wreckage ultimately came to a halt. Williamson was stuck beneath the automobile, and at this point was still fully conscious and yelling for help. While drivers continued to race, one decided to pull over. David Purley got out and raced towards the debris, attempting to turn the car over. Despite his greatest efforts, he was unable to complete this task. The track marshals, who did have fire extinguishers, merely stood there and just watched. Track marshals in those days didn't have any sort of fire suits. Seeing how much fire there was, I guess they didn't want to risk their lives trying to save Williamson. Some marshals went towards the automobile and opted not to use their extinguishers, instead simply just standing there. Two marshals attempted to help Purley overturn the automobile briefly, but shortly gave up. The crowd stood there in shock and disbelief, and once they realized what was going on, they began to rush forward. It was at this time that the marshals began to intervene, not to assist Williamson, instead choosing to move the crowd back. Purley obtained a fire extinguisher, but it was insignificant to extinguish the flames. The fire blazed on, and Williamson continued to beg for Purley to get him out. At this point, Purley was running all over the place, begging and pleading for track marshals and police to help him. The race continued, but drivers at the time didn't know the severity of the accident. Purley attempted to flip the automobile again, but obviously lacked the necessary strength. The marshals were not wearing any fireproof clothes, as I earlier mentioned, so they couldn't help raise the automobile and also couldn't put the fire out. After a few minutes, it fell dead silent. Roger Williamson would die not from burns sustained from the crash, but from smoke asphyxiation. Purley was taken away by a marshal who had done nothing to assist him, and Purley responded aggressively to the individual. While all of this was happening, a fire truck was located about 150 yards up the road and remained still for about 5 to 6 minutes after the incident. The fire truck was ordered not to drive the incorrect way around the track, and it wasn't really backward, but more diagonal. Despite this tragedy taking place, the race was not called off. Some individuals chastised other drivers for not stopping to assist during the collision. They imagined it was Purley attempting to correct his own automobile.
For example, in the race, I never knew that there was somebody sitting in there, because I drove by, I saw the fire and everything, and I saw Pearly, there running around. So I thought it is the driver who was in the car is out of the car. You know, I never knew that Williamson was sitting in there, except after the race when I was told.
In those days, it was usual for privateers like Pearly to try and preserve their own vehicles from harm, and when they spotted Pearly, they figured it was him trying to save his own car, not someone else's life.
If you were prepared and able to try and turn the car over, why did nobody come to your help?
Well, you must remember that I just climbed out of a racing car. My blood was up. He was a very good friend of mine. You know, perhaps it's understandable that people won't come near a burning car.
Why do you think it took the fire engine so long to get here?
It's got to be looked into, this, because, you know, there's just something wrong. I think possibly the race should have been stopped so that the fire engine could come around at full speed. He seemed to be hugging the curb, obviously, because the cars were still coming through at racing speeds, virtually. I think the race should have been stopped, and it's very difficult, of course, because we're still about 1.5 miles away from the grid where the decisions are made, and all they could see was a lot of smoke going up in the air. They didn't obviously realize the extent of the tragedy.
What are your feelings about this today?
Well, if you'd asked me yesterday, I think it would have been a different, I would have said something different, but I've slept on it, and I can see now why a lot of people wouldn't come and help me. But I think that we could have, you know, done something else.
The outrageous inadequate degree of preparation and safety cost Roger Williamson his life. This is without a doubt one of Formula One's worst moments, and in my opinion, the most disgraceful. A driver being killed instantly on impact is one thing, but a driver being killed as a result of a combination of carelessness, apathy for safety, and even fear on the part of a few is extremely hard to accept. In the years following the accident, fire-resistant clothing would become mandatory for all trackside marshals so that they would be able to assist in the event of a fire. The next few years also saw a noticeable increase in drivers stopping at accidents to assist in rescue efforts. On the 30th anniversary of Roger Williamson's fatal crash in 2003, a bronze statue of him was unveiled at the Donington Park circuit in his native Leicestershire. David Purley made a few more F1 starts after this incident, the last being the 1977 British Grand Prix. After retiring from motorsports, he would get involved in acrobatics, but tragically, on July 2nd, 1985, at just the age of 40, he would die in a plane crash. I'm sure up until the day he died, those sounds of Roger Williamson screaming haunted him. But there's some solace knowing that he was once again reunited with his buddy in a much better place. Because of tragedies like the one we just talked about, safety has come a long way in motorsports. Regardless of how much safety has advanced, it's always going to be dangerous. But like I said in the beginning of the video, thankfully, deaths in racing aren't as common. Roger Williamson was 25 years old. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.